we started looking at options abroad in the event that they become infirm. They want to have the most options for healthcare, which unfortunately is not always available in the US. Wealthy people have been doing this for a long time. It has been happening, but now it's become more democratized because travel is more affordable. The sandwich generation, which is like me, who also considering because we cannot afford to live in the US. The healthcare crisis is at your feet. You need to start thinking about alternatives in the event that you become ill.
So how do you make a determination? And if we came in and sat with you, how would you make, what countries would you recommend? Welcome to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. If you ever asked, how do I protect myself and those I love if something unexpected happened to me? You're in the right place. I'm your host, Niki Weiss, and together we'll explore how to protect yourself in a world where both your physical and digital legacy leave a lasting impact. And welcome back to another episode of the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. My guest today is Maryam. Maryam, you are not just an attorney, but you specialize in, international repatronization of people who want to actually live their life overseas, not in the US or Canada, and live their best lives and end of life. So welcome to the show, and please tell us how you got here today.
Hi, Nikki. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. Yes, so essentially, I started off doing private practice estate planning. And then over the last few years, I transitioned into helping Americans relocate abroad as part of their estate planning package because I saw what was happening with the healthcare crisis. Most of my clients happen to be seniors. So we're also looking at their quality of life, access to healthcare in the US. So then we started looking at options abroad in the event that they become infirm. They want to have the most options for healthcare, which unfortunately is not always available in the US.
For a cost. I mean, I'm fascinated by this whole concept that to even think about, I'm leaving the place I've probably known all my life to go live it's not even necessarily golden years, right? This could be like they could be infirmed, or I know a few people that have moved to the Philippines, for example, because they needed so much healthcare and they couldn't afford it in the States.
Yeah, it's a travesty because I experienced this personally with my mother when I was in my early 20s. She lost her health insurance and she has an autoimmune condition and her medication is like a intravenous medication that she has to go to the rheumatologist every 6 weeks. When insurance covers it, that's fine, but when she lost it, the cost was $7,000.
Per dose?
So even if one time you can afford it, that's not sustainable. And so she went without insurance. I believe it was for about 9 months. And because she was unable to get the treatment, she ended up in a wheelchair for those 9 months because with rheumatoid arthritis, it becomes debilitating. And so I remember just feeling so hopeless. Like there's nothing that can be done. Doesn't a rheumatologist have like a vial in the back? And I remember calling the manufacturer, I believe it was Johnson and Johnson, and them saying, "Well, it's regulated with the stock market." And I'm like, "How can medication be something that's a commodity played on the stock market?" And so she eventually got the insurance, but I'm like, there's something wrong here that a person's health will just spiral down and there's nothing anyone could do. She couldn't even be essentially admitted into a hospital and care. There was just nothing she could do. So she was just relegated to being in a wheelchair. And I said, something is wrong here. And so we started looking at options to go to Cuba. I remember we were looking, but the internet wasn't robust like it was there, like it is.
So what year are we talking now?
We're looking at like 2004, 5. And so,
And why Cuba?
Because we saw Michael Moore's special of Americans going to Cuba to get diabetes medication. Do you remember that special? Oh my
Well, I'm just curious, right? With the Patriot Act, I would thought that Cuba would have been a country that the Americans were not invited to.
Yeah, well, there was a workaround where you could fly to Canada and then from Canada go to Cuba and make sure your passport's not stamped. So that's what Americans were doing.
Wow.
And I believe the cost was about 4,000 US for like a whole treatment. And the program was facilitated by like a Canadian company. So we were looking at those sorts of options, but we don't know enough. And so still trying to figure out this healthcare thing. And then you fast forward to 2022, where I'm in private practice and I don't have health insurance in the US because I was quoted at like 4,000 a month as a healthy woman with no health conditions.
So you're practicing law as a solo
Hmm.
attorney in
Hmm.
your own private practice, and the insurance companies were quoting you $4,000 per month just as a healthy individual.
As a healthy individual. And I remember having to go to the emergency room for something.
Mhm.
I think I had like indigestion. And one of the emergency room doctors said, "Oh, yeah, her husband's a lawyer. He's in private practice. He doesn't have insurance either. He's on my insurance." And I'm like, "Oh, so this is just something?" She's like, "Yeah, it's just something that people in private practice, it's just cost prohibitive to pay for health insurance because, it's based on a group." So I started to look at this. I'm like, something is wrong here. And then fast forward to 2022, I went to Colombia for a Spanish immersion and fell in love with Colombia. I went for a Spanish immersion as well as I work with an attorney who does some real estate there. And then I went back months later with my mother just for vacation. And I said, I'm going to go to the dentist here. So I messaged one of my friends there and he says, "Yeah, here's a dentist that I go to." And then we went for a cleaning and the cleaning was $11. And I'm like,
Without insurance.
without insurance. You just call, make an appointment.
I have dental insurance and I don't pay that little.
Exactly. It was 11. I was like, what? $11? Can't be. And then they said, "We're going to send you for x-rays and everything like that too." To like the full Monty. My mother, she needed more work too. And she needed a implant, which an implant in the US is about 10 grand. So her implant costs $1,000 for all the work. And then I said, something is here, something is going on that Americans are not aware of, and they're being exploited when they're at the most vulnerable. So then I started to facilitate this in my practice to tell my clients, listen, the healthcare crisis is at your feet. You need to start thinking about alternatives in the event that you become ill. So we've secured their visas in Colombia and other countries. Some have already relocated abroad, done their estate plan in the US as well as whichever country they're relocated to. So they have the option. That's what it's really about, like providing options.
Well, let me take a step back because your mom, so you go to Colombia in 2022. So how do you get from we're visiting to Colombia where, oh, maybe we need to move to Colombia, reestablish residency in order just to receive healthcare?
So how do we get to that? So Colombia has a large expat population. They even have a US military hospital already in Medellin, Colombia, which is another region. So this has been going on for the last 30, 40 years where a lot of veterans have relocated for healthcare in Colombia. This was unbeknownst to me at the time. So they have been facilitating this relationships for Americans to come there for healthcare and to live there.
So for those people who are not familiar with the term expat,
Mm.
which means expatriate, um, so I'm going to have you put on your international lawyer's hat and kind of do a 101 and explain to people about the immigration laws for U.S. citizens that are interested in going and reestablishing residency in another country.
So
They're
it's
called expats.
essentially immigration. Expat is sort of like the politically correct, perhaps it's an elitist term for Americans moving to these countries, where they're leaving their native, their natural born country behind to live somewhere else, and they are applying for residencies. So most countries have developed three different types of residencies. So we're looking at residency, not citizenship. So a person can apply for residency to stay longer than the 90 days. Most countries, an American can travel and stay there for 90 days, but after that, an American needs permission to stay there long term. So that's what residency is about. And so the tracks are usually for investment. If someone is investing in real estate, then the country says, okay, we'll give you permission to stay here long term. But that comes with a hefty price tag. So sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. That was initially like the very beginning of allowing Americans to relocate to these countries. But now the countries have opened up for digital nomads, like people who work remotely from anywhere in the world, but they're not relying on business for that country because these countries are concerned with taking business away from local businesses. So for a digital nomad, they have their own clients outside of that country, and that's a really important requirement. The next option is for retirees. Some countries have an age requirement that you have to be 50 years or older, like with the Philippines. Some countries are like, no, if you can show that you are retired and you're not relying on any income from work, that's sufficient enough. In that case, it could be like pensions or IRAs, whatever the case may be. And so it's a pretty simple process. If we use Colombia, for example, you would show that you have income of 900 US dollars per month in order to be eligible to apply. Um, and that's for the retirement visa. I believe for the digital nomad visa, it's about the same 900 US dollars a month. So as long as a person meets the income requirements, they can relocate there as well as not have a criminal background. And why the income requirements is that these social service programs that these countries have are for their nationals. So they want to make sure that someone from the US is not moving there solely to rely on their social service program. So that's why the income. And a person can live relatively well on 900 US dollars a month.
So let's pretend that my husband and I are in a situation where we're in our late 60s, early 70s. We don't have resources. This is a scenario. We don't have resources to support our incapacitation if and when that occurred. My husband maybe just got diagnosed with not a terminal disease, but maybe a condition that will, he's not dying, but that he's going to need medical care that we just can't afford because we don't have a backup plan.
Mhm.
We come to you and we're like, okay, now what? And he's got, I don't know, pulmonary heart condition,
Mhm.
COPD, with cardiac complications.
Mhm.
What is your, like, how would that consult go? What is
So
your recommendation?
so the recommendation would be, do you want to move abroad long term or do you want the option of going back and forth?
God, that's such a hard question, right? Because, I mean, for a solo ager who might not have that connection, it might be an easier conversation. I mean, they're starting life all over again.
Mhm.
For, I mean, I know somebody currently who they moved to Turkey,
Mhm.
um, and they have to travel back and forth just to stay in contact with their family that's in the States. So that's just, wow, just to have that. I have to move abroad just so I can get medical coverage and give up the
Mhm.
contact with my family. But then again, I'm moving because I don't want my family to, I don't want to have to be a burden to them.
Yeah, it's a trade-off. And that's how immigration has worked for thousands of years, where one person goes and leaves their family behind. And sometimes it's the impetus for the rest of the family to come because they say, well, you're living so well. What are the options for us? It's challenging, but it's a trade-off for a quality of life. And if for this hypothetical, a person has a terminal condition and it's about being comfortable for however much time they have left, that's what they have to evaluate to spend the rest of their years comfortable, being cared for, or fighting with insurance companies and hospitals in the
Yeah.
US.
So how do you make a determination? And if we came in and sat with you, how would you make what countries would you recommend? What countries are on your
I
chosen list?
I would recommend Colombia. I would recommend Mexico. I would recommend Panama for the healthcare. That's just, top three, and as well as Costa Rica. And because of their friendly relationship with the US. I
Right.
understand the Colombia.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's it's January 2025, so who knows what the future holds. So can we just step in, put our toe into that conversation, not go too deep into it, but so here we are, January 25th, a lot of political activity going on. So talk to me more about, you just named some countries that are a hotbed right now, at least, in the news.
Right, right. What I see happening, because I do plan on going to Colombia in the next few weeks, is that while the politicians are sparring, the people are still doing what they have to do. That it doesn't really hit the ground in terms of impacting the daily lives of Colombians. So there's no hostility. And historically, Colombians have always welcomed Americans who come there for their health care. They take such pride in their health care that it is robust and efficient and extensive, that foreigners come there to enjoy it, regardless of what the politicians are doing. There's still, that's their calling card, and they know that. So there's no hostility. It's more like that's their problem, the politicians, is an awareness of that is the figureheads, their problem, but we still have to do our job, whether we're doctors or nurses or care providers. That's what our focus is, not what these politicians are arguing about.
So the countries you named were one Spanish speaking countries.
Hmm.
They're on the northern hemisphere,
Hmm.
right? So South America and Central America. Are there other countries that um, I hear about? Portugal, Spain. I know people in the Philippines, Americans who have expated to the Philippines and Turkey. What are some of the other countries that you
Yeah,
have?
Italy, Portugal, Spain, Greece, which all have extensive health care and have facilitated really easy visa processes for Americans. Um, and it's spreading. It's spreading for the invitation for more Americans, not only to relocate there for healthcare, but also for work because they have a population shortage. And so they're inviting skilled people to relocate there. What
Skilled healthcare workers.
skilled healthcare workers as well as skilled engineers, um, people in the STEM programs, right? So there's a green light.
Green light for encouraging. So then, how do the U.S. government feel about Americans leaving to go get their health care elsewhere?
I wonder about that too, Nikki, because you would think they would say, okay, we're losing our best,
Brain drain.
finest. Why don't we do so? I don't know. I'm really confused. Have there's not been some clamoring as to we are losing our finest. This is going to end up being a brain drain. I don't know. I wonder too.
So we're talking about two different topics. One is the brain drain of the professionals that support the medical system, and then the other population, the other group that we're talking about is the aging population that just cannot afford to age in place in the United States.
Hmm.
So
And
we
then you
really
have
have to.
the sandwich generation, which is like me, who are professionals who also considering leaving and taking their intellect and their expertise and their money outside because we cannot afford to live in the US.
not live well,
Not
right?
well. Right, right,
Right?
exactly. With
To
basic
make those
necessities.
choices.
Right, right. So I wonder, why have there not been any incentives to keep or to attract Americans to stay stateside? I don't know. I wonder if they're just not paying attention, or they think, oh, it's not that bad, or I don't know.
So there's chaos and chaos to clarity, which is actually the name of your book.
Right.
So talk to us about how, knowing that there's so much chaos going on, both politically, geopolitically, and now within the healthcare system, our options are getting narrower as far as what to do with ourselves when we meet this end of life planning process. So what is your book, and what do you guide people on?
Oh, yes. So my book, Chaos to Clarity, this is a labor of love. This was based on the questions over the years I received from clients who may not necessarily be ready to engage in estate planning, or I met them when someone has already passed away and they had no idea where to begin. So it is a guide essentially to answer the questions of, is a will enough? Why it's not enough? What else is more sufficient than a will? So we're looking at trust. What are the different types of trust? Not all trust are not one size fits all, as well as Medicaid long-term care planning for an individual who wants to think about staying in the US and accessing healthcare and wondering if they'll end up in a nursing home, how to qualify for that because it's based on need. Otherwise, you'll be paying $10,000 or more a month to stay in a nursing home. As well as for the family members who are left behind to pick up the pieces. What do they have to know about estate taxes? What if they inherit a house that has a mortgage on it? What can they do?
This is a thing. Like people don't realize this is really complicated. So then let me ask you, if I go overseas, how is my social security, like how is that affected? How can I continue as far as receiving governmental support once I go overseas? Is that it? Is the US government is watching their hands of my care?
No, what happens with Social Security? So, as long as you're not moving to one of the countries that are on the hot list,
Like Cuba,
Cuba, North Korea, there's a,
Syria.
yeah, then you'll get access to
Every-
your Social Security.
right.
That's not an issue, as well as your pension. You'll continue to do your banking like before. With Medicaid long-term care, you just will have to do your appointments to make sure you're still alive, because Medicaid is, or Medicare is connected to Social Security. So Medicaid, you make sure you do your appointments, but nothing will be taken away from you. You still have it abroad, but it cannot be used abroad.
So if I have to do my care, I'm sorry, you said the appointments, right? So they have to be done US.
You may want to travel back to the US periodically to make sure that, to let them know that you're still alive and that you still need the care. For Medicare, which is tied to your Social Security, that's also the expectation, because there's Medicare A, B, C, D, J,
G.
K, L, M, N, or something like that.
There's a
O,
G in there.
yeah, it's ridiculous. So Medicare A and B, most people keep their Medicare Part A because it's free, and Medicare Part B because if they cancel it, then they will have to pay a penalty. So it's just wiser to keep it.
So I can keep my Medicare
You could keep your
and go overseas,
right.
but I should have a budget to make sure that I'm flying back and forth. So the US government knows that I'm still alive. I still expect you to pay out what I've paid in for the last 30, 40 years.
Hmm.
Is that right?
Hmm.
Oh my gosh.
But a person has the option to cancel too. If you have good health care and you're like, you know what, I'm not traveling back to the US for the next 5 years, because people make that call. They cancel their Medicare. They don't plan on coming back. But people who are coming back and they want to make sure that they have health care, then it's wise to keep it.
So what's your plan
Well,
for you
my
personally
plan,
and your mom's?
well, my plan is so I have two residencies. I have Italy and I have Colombia. And essentially to live in Italy full time and then go back and forth from Italy to Colombia. I bought a home in Italy that I'm renovating, so that's the plan to live there full time.
And for your mother, so she's just going to age in Italy.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That is, talk about a project.
It is, but what's the alternative, Nikki? To wonder if the government is going to get its act together, to wonder if she needs nursing home care, whether there will be any nursing homes available to provide care for her. Because that's the other thing. Just because you qualify for Medicaid long term care, it doesn't necessarily mean the facilities will be available to support this aging population. Because nursing homes are closing across the US, and there's some regions, there's a nursing home desert where there's not enough facilities.
So talk to me about that. I wasn't aware that that is going on. As our population is aging, why are nursing homes closing? Because they're not profitable?
Oh, they're profitable. Corruption, mismanagement, the Medicaid reimbursement is not done quickly to keep these facilities afloat. A lot of these facilities are privately run, and they're not run with care in mind. They're run with a mindset of how much money can we get from these people and deliver the least amount of care as possible.
Oof.
And in some cases, some nursing homes are sedating the patients so that they won't have to deliver as much care, because then there's a nursing shortage and caretaker shortage. So how do they remedy that? Sedate the patients.
So those are nursing homes that are still open. What about the ones that are closing?
Those have closed, in which case the patients may end up having to find other accommodations to live. Sometimes they end up houseless and in shelters until something is in place to place them in another nursing home. Sometimes they have to find an apartment.
Is this a crisis that's being swept under the carpet? I mean, we're just not talking about it.
It is. It doesn't get a lot of attention. I don't know if it's because this is a vulnerable population and they don't have a lot of advocacy. Many of them are ailing and they can't advocate for themselves. Many of them have dementia, Alzheimer's. They're vulnerable essentially.
Right,
So
memory care
who's
issues.
going to ring the alarm for them? This has been happening. My father's a retired nurse and he worked in nursing homes when they were good, like in the 90s. And he told me that the nursing home executive directors, and I guess this is controversial to say, the executive directors, the doctors, the nurses, they're all in on it, sedating these patients and taking their resources essentially. There's a movie that was done about it. It's called I Care a Lot. And it's about like how a guardian started sedating one of the patients and siphoning off the resources and taking away the resource because she was a wealthy woman and she had no family or friends to object, they thought, until she was connected to like this cartel or something like that.
Oh, wait, that's a real, I saw that on television. Wait, that was a real story? Because I think I saw that on a
Yeah, I think it was
television
on
show.
Netflix a few years ago. But
I didn't realize that
yeah,
that was a real story.
yeah, I mean it probably is, but essentially these people are vulnerable, so no one's ringing the alarm to make sure that they're cared for and not neglected.
So are we saying that by going overseas might give us some people a chance to have better, more ethical care given than staying? And of course, you and I we're just making a very blanketed decision. comment here. This is not every, there are wonderful facilities out there. I know people that
Right, of course.
are in facilities, and having done pet therapy and gone to some of these facilities, the patients are extremely well cared for.
Yeah.
And, but however, there are those outliers,
Hmm.
and that people are. So, do you have any numbers as far as like where that expat? I mean, what's this term you call where someone makes the decision to go live the rest of their lives, or leave the United States in order to get healthcare somewhere? What is that called?
So you have the medical tourism, where I believe it's in 2023, it was $1 trillion industry or $1 billion industry.
Okay, in 2023.
It was in the billions.
Okay.
I have to check that. Wealthy people have been doing this for a long time, to go to Switzerland for stem cell research, for stem cell transplants, to go to Mexico. It has been happening, but now it's become more democratized because travel is more affordable and people are realizing this is an option with social media. So people have always been doing this, but I think it was relegated to just the elite who could travel to Switzerland, who could travel to Germany, who could travel to Sweden.
Those are more for like spa experiences, like wellness, longevity experiences, not necessarily
No, for
to live their
stem
lives
cell
out,
too, stem cell
right? For treatment.
transplants. Not just for spas, but for medical care.
So medical tourism, if no one's ever heard that term before. And so what's your prediction in the next 3 to 5 years?
This is about options for people. That is why I'm giving this information and these resources. It's about options, that if this doesn't work, try this. That's really why I think it's important to have this conversation so people don't feel defeated and think, well, I have this condition, this is it for me. That perhaps they can go to Mexico for 3 months and get a treatment that's affordable and come back to their life in the US if medical tourism is something that they're curious about, with even without relocating.
Right.
Or for back to your example earlier, someone in their 60s who's concerned about their long-term care, they're healthy now, but they wonder, their children live in different states.
No one's there to care for
No one's
them
there to care
when
for
they
them.
become incapacitated, right? They don't want to be a burden to
Right.
their children.
So can they foresee, okay, when I'm in my 80s, what is my life going to look like? And can I have some autonomy in deciding that before it's too late? And I say before it's too late, before they lose their faculties and they don't have the mental capacity to make these decisions. Because
Right.
typically when people start fading, they know they're starting to fade, but they don't have the awareness of what do I do now? So it's about forward thinking. When I'm in my 80s and 90s, I want to lay seeds to make sure that I am comfortable and I can age with dignity. And that's why the visas are available. They could say, you know what, I'm getting to that point. I want to decide and essentially live in a long term care facility. If we use Colombia, for example, for $400 a month and get the care, the
Versus $400 a day.
versus $400 a day. Exactly, Nikki.
Right.
So I actually have this friend. He's American. His wife is Colombian, and he relocated to Colombia when he retired. He drove trucks in the US and he brought his brother with him who's with special needs. And he said, I couldn't leave my brother behind because he's special needs. He will end up, homeless, digging in the garbage, and no one would care about him. So he moved him to Colombia and he put him into a facility that cares for him, that gives him occupational therapy, 3 meals a day. He gets to play with the horses, and I get to visit. And he says, I get to visit him on the weekends, and the caretakers hug him and kiss him and play with him. And he says, if I left him in the US, who would have known how he would have ended up? And he gets all of that for $400 a month. So that's the options that we're talking about.
Well, this is just an amazing, eye-opening conversation, especially for some people who never realize that as they're starting to put together their final playbook,
Mhm.
right, their end of life plan, that when they're looking at their options for this final stage, that maybe going abroad should be a consideration. So, what are some, like, maybe two takeaways, 2 to 3 takeaways someone should consider if they're to look into this option as well?
Their takeaways is to think about, I'm healthy now. If I'm not, what do I want my cure to look like? And to think about that, mind map that, okay, nursing homes right now they're available, right? In the US. But what would be a good plan B? Where is a country that I can research to see if they have care that in the event I'm unable to decide for myself, but I can lay out a plan for my family to know, place me here so that I'm not a burden and things are in place. This may be an exercise that a person may never use, but it's something to consider to give them peace of mind. Just like with people create a trust, they don't necessarily reap the benefits of the trust immediately. But every night they go to bed, they know, okay, I have this trust in place. If anything happened to me tonight, my family will know what my desires are. They will avoid probate. They won't have to, figure things out, come up with all sorts of money to pay a lawyer. So they can sleep at night knowing that there's some future benefit that will benefit everyone. So that's what people could do when they start to think about how they want to age and what they want that aging process to look like.
And if people wanted to get in touch with you, Miriam, best place to find and connect.
Well, I have a YouTube channel. It's called Legally Abroad. And then I have an email address. People can email me. My email address is mgreenlawls@gmail.com. But I do weekly videos discussing this topic, moving abroad, preparing for long term care, and all sorts of legal topics that are relevant to the country right now, which is so many.
And it's always changing. And of course, your book behind you,
Oh, yes.
Chaos to Clarity.
Chaos to Clarity, which is a manual to guide you regarding the estate planning process. It's from the lens of a client, the questions that one may have before they embark on estate planning, or even from the lens of a person who's lost a loved one and do not know where to begin. This is a guide for you.
State. And with that, thank you so much for joining me today in this intriguing conversation, um, especially for those that are looking for an international option to aging.
Thank,
Thank you so much.
thank you, Nick. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. I hope this conversation inspired you to take control and plan for the inevitable to protect yourself and those you leave behind. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at digitallegacypodcast.com. Remember, life is full of surprises. What happens after you die shouldn't be. So keep your passwords safe and your playbook up to date.